A young solicitor from Edwardian London is still struggling to accept the sudden death of his wife. He travels to the marshlands of northern England to take care of the affairs of a recently deceased owner of Eel Marsh House. Despite local rumors of hauntings, he begins working to finish his task but soon realizes that the supernatural entity is a black-veiled woman who claims the village children by having them take their lives in penance for her own son being taken from her. Can he break the curse and rid himself of the woman in black's haunting presence? Let's find out. In the village of Crythin, Gifford in England, 3 adorable little girls are playing with their porcelain dolls in the nursery. Something catches their attention off screen, and suddenly they turn their gaze to the back wall. Without saying a word, they get up and walk towards the window wall. They open all 3 windows and jump out on their own. After a moment of silence, a woman's scream is heard, presumably from the person who finds the 3 little girls' lifeless bodies. Arthur, a young agent, is seen preparing for work while bidding farewell to his 7-year-old son, Joseph. As Arthur has work commitments, Joseph will be left under the care of a nurse. Joseph has drawn a picture of himself, Arthur, and his mother in the form of an angel, on a piece of paper titled Tuesday. When Arthur notices that he has been drawn with a sad face, he asks Joseph why. Joseph explains that Arthur always looks that way. Arthur looks through the drawings, all of which are blank except for Friday, the day when Joseph will finally see his father again. Arthur's superior, Mr. Bentley, speaks to him in a discourteous manner and informs him that this is his last chance to prove himself, as the real estate company is not a charitable organization. Arthur has made several blunders in the past, and he will not be given another opportunity. His task is to go to Eel Marsh House, a deserted and isolated estate located on the marshland in Crythin, Gifford, and retrieve the last will and testament of Alice Drablow, the deceased owner. The local solicitor, Mr. Jerome, who has been uncooperative, is whom he should seek out when he arrives. Arthur takes a train ride and dozes off. While sleeping, he recalls the time his son was born. The nurse proudly announces that it's a boy and everything is perfectly fine, but the doctor immediately apologizes and tells him that nothing could have been done for his late wife, Stella Kipps. Arthur vividly remembers how a blood-stained sheet was used to cover her horrified face. He wakes up and asks his fellow passenger, Samuel Daly, if they have passed Crythin, Gifford. Samuel offers him a ride to town since they are both going there and even invites him to have dinner with him and his wife the next day. Upon arrival at the local inn, he encounters the inhospitable and stubborn proprietor named Mr. Fisher, who informs him that his reservations are not registered. However, his wife intervenes and proposes that they cannot abandon him in the stormy weather. Consequently, Arthur is accommodated in the attic, the same spot from where the 3 young girls had jumped at the start of the movie. The following day, Arthur pays a visit to the local solicitor, Mr. Jerome, who advises him to leave the town as soon as possible. However, Arthur insists on staying until Friday to conduct a fair assessment of all the items in the house. Despite Jerome's attempts to rush him out, Arthur insists on going to the mansion instead of leaving town. The cab driver charges an unreasonably high amount of 6 shillings for the trip, claiming that no one else would take him there. The town is connected to the mansion by a narrow causeway that winds through the marshes. The driver drops Arthur off just outside the mansion estate, and when Arthur requests to be picked up at 3 o'clock, the driver informs him that it will have to be at 5 o'clock due to the tides. Arthur arrives at the property and settles inside and takes a glance at Joseph's drawing before getting to work. However, he gets distracted by strange noises and decides to investigate. In one of the bedrooms, he stumbles upon a nest of ravens and a startled raven flies out, catching him off guard. While looking out the window, he spots a woman dressed in black walking among the tombstones in the garden. The raven continues to distract him and lands softly on the bed. When he looks out again, the woman has vanished. Arthur rushes out into the thick fog, but unable to see anything. He hears what he thinks are cries and a man shouting. The feeling of impending doom hangs over him. But it turns out to be just the driver arriving to pick him up. Arthur thought he heard distant sounds of children's cries and hurries to the police station to report the matter, insinuating that it might be an accident in the marsh. However, the constable, Collins, informs him that no villager would dare to enter the mansion on their own. While Collins goes to check something, 2 children arrive with a severely ill Victoria Hardy, who is consumed lie and is spitting blood. Despite Arthur's desperate cries for help, he can do nothing to save the child. Sadly, Victoria passes away shortly after. After returning to his lodgings, Arthur hears what he believes to be the cries of a woman and calls out for Mrs. Fisher's assistance. However, he soon realizes that it's only a pet raven that's imitating the sound of a woman's cries. Mrs. Fisher serves him a drink and urges him to leave the town to be with his son. Later, Arthur meets up with Samuel at his son's tomb, and walk to Samuel's home. During dinner with the Daly family, the conversation is somewhat awkward, but overall enjoyable. Unfortunately, Elizabeth daily experiences fits of hysteria, which she believes are caused by her deceased son speaking through her, and has to be sedated. In a later conversation, Samuel reveals to Arthur that he and Elizabeth lost their son due to drowning. He also mentions that there are many superstitions in the town, but that they are all just illusions. Arthur sets out to find Mr. Jerome, but instead he comes across a frightened girl who is trapped in a room. She warns Arthur to stay away from her as he is responsible for Victoria's death. On their way, they come across locals mourning the loss of Victoria, but Samuel doesn't take their grief seriously and dismisses it as superstition. Samuel takes Arthur around in his car and they pass by a cross planted by the side of the path. He drops Arthur off at the house, offering to pick him up at 11, but Arthur decides to spend the night there. Samuel then lends him his dog. Inside the house, Arthur lights some candles and tries to unlock a room that's inaccessible with any of the keys. He then focuses his attention on a heavy wooden box with Nathaniel Drablow's name on it. As he tinkers with the daguerreotype, he catches a fleeting glimpse of the dark eyes of a woman dressed in black. A series of scribbled photographs depict the sudden appearance of a shadow, which sends a dog barking in a frenzy. Arthur follows the dog, and they end up near Nathaniel Drablow's tombstone. Later on, while walking back to the mansion, Arthur spots the woman in black retreating from the window. Investigating the room, he discovers a rundown landscape and senses a presence behind him. Although he cannot see her, he feels her presence and turns around to find nothing. He discovers a wooden box filled with cards addressed to Nathaniel from his biological mother, who signed herself as Mummy, the woman in black, who was actually Janet, buried in a tombstone beside Nathaniel's. As per the available documents, it seems that Janet had to give up her child for adoption due to her mental incapability to raise him. Surprisingly, Nathaniel was adopted by Janet's own sister, Alice, who kept it a secret and raised him as her own. Arthur discovers through numerous letters that Janet was deeply unhappy because she was not allowed to meet her son, and she held Alice responsible for her misfortune. Moreover, the death certificates reveal that Janet took her own life by hanging herself in the nursery and swore never to forgive Alice, who she believed saved herself and abandoned Nathaniel's body in the marsh. As Arthur dozes off, the woman in black's shadow approaches him, but the dog's barking scares her away. Upon awakening, Arthur ventures through the dark corridor to a locked room. He attempts to unlock it but fails, so he goes in search of a key. To his surprise, the door is now open. As he enters, he sees a rocking chair moving by itself, and for a moment, the audience glimpses the woman in black rocking in it. Beneath the wallpaper, Arthur discovers a message written in blood, "You could have saved him," amidst the mechanical toys. Moving on to the next room, Arthur peers out the window and sees Janet's screaming face. He then hears someone trying to open the front door, causing the dog to bark uncontrollably. In the midst of a thunderstorm with lightning, Arthur goes outside and sees visions of dead children in the marshes, including Victoria. As he rushes back to the mansion, he notices the black footprints of the woman in black and decides to follow them to a room where he finds Janet hanging herself. After leaving the room, he spots the woman in black coming towards him from the opposite end of the corridor. In an attempt to escape, he barricades himself in a room, but Nathaniel suddenly appears from the bed. With no other option left, he runs towards the front door and fortunately finds Samuel waiting for him outside. The unfortunate events don't end there as Jerome's house catches fire, and his daughter is trapped inside. Arthur tries to save her, but he sees the woman in black urging the girl to set herself on fire. To make things worse, the townspeople hold Arthur responsible for the death. However, Samuel tries to console him in these tough times. Arthur goes to Elizabeth at her son's grave, where she discloses the truth about Janet and the children. They can communicate through Elizabeth and reveal that the woman in black is responsible for their deaths, as she lost her own child and seeks revenge. During their conversation, Elizabeth has a sudden outburst, repeating the words "she is coming." Samuel arrives just in time to witness this, and Elizabeth draws a picture of Arthur with his son beside a train engine before passing out. Arthur soon realizes that his own son, Joseph, who is arriving in Crythin Gifford that night, is the next target of the vengeful Janet. To break the curse, Arthur manages to persuade Sam to assist him in locating Nathaniel's body and reuniting him with his mother by giving him a proper burial. Arthur straps himself to Samuel's car and ventures into the murky marshlands. After some time, Sam hauls Arthur out of the sludge, and they discover a cart containing Nathaniel's remains. Unfortunately, the car is unable to support the cart, and it tumbles back into the bog. However, Arthur manages to clamber over it and out of the bog, carrying Nathaniel's lifeless body with him. Arthur covers Nathaniel's body and prepares for the arrival of the woman in black. He activates all the mechanical toys in the room and places the postcards his mother sent him all around his body. Elsewhere in the house, Samuel sees his deceased son entering a room and follows him, but he is trapped inside. Arthur cannot hear Samuel's cries for help as the candles go out and the corridor becomes even darker. The woman in black startles Arthur with her shouting, but disappears soon after. Meanwhile, the other door opens, freeing Samuel. Nathaniel's body is placed on top of Janet's tomb, but her voice echoes throughout the house, expressing that she will never forgive the injustice she experienced. Assuming Janet was finally calmed down, Arthur and his son Joseph meet up at the train station. While bidding farewell to Samuel, the nurse went to pay for their tickets back to London. Suddenly, Joseph lets go of Arthur's hand and jumps onto the train tracks as a train was approaching. Arthur notices the woman in black and saw his son walking on the tracks. He quickly jumps onto the tracks to save his son, but unfortunately, both of them are hit by the oncoming train. Samuel witnesses the horrifying scene of dead children and the screaming woman in black from the other side of the track through the gaps of the moving wagons. After the train passes, Arthur is holding Joseph in an empty train station. They are welcomed into the afterlife by Stella, and together they walk along the tracks as the woman in black ominously looked on. We hope you enjoyed today's recap. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new video and will help the channel create more recaps like this.